All righty, good morning to early risers. I'm Sue Parrott, and this is my partner, husband, spouse, Steven Harper. We're both members of our local Audubon chapter, which is called North Cascades Audubon. We work in Whatcom County, and we're, I guess, an affiliate of the National Audubon Society, if any of you are familiar with that. Steve has been a birder probably since a little kid. I think it was his fourth grade teacher. I learned about birding through Steve. And I think probably since we retired, maybe over the last 10 to 15 years, we became much more serious birders just because we had more time and more flexibility. We make birding a part of our life rather than the focus of our lives. Birding is important to us, but you know, it's kind of like this little add-on to many of the things that we do. So we love birds, so we have a lot to share about birds and some particular birds. So I'm going to move quickly so that we have time for questions. But what I wanted to do first was talk about why I think birding is a healthy hobby, why I think it's really good for us and for the environment and for birds. And then we're going to feature, I think, about 10 or 12 birds that you can see here in the winter. And then Steve is going to show you our website of North Cascades and some parts of the website that might be really helpful. And then hopefully we'll have time for questions. So the first thing, I don't know when you think of birding what you think about, but my definition of birding is really just about anything related to noticing, observing, listening to birds in their natural environment. So that could mean simply feeding them on your deck, feeding them in your yard. It could mean just listening to bird calls when you go for a walk or when you're outside. It could mean using a pair of binoculars and watching birds. It could mean doing a community science project like the Christmas bird count or your backyard project feeder watch where you count your backyard birds. It could mean watching webcams, reading. It could mean, you know, traveling, being as serious as keeping a life list and being one of these people that, you know, they get a rare bird alert and then off they go to wherever that rare bird is just so they can add one more bird to their life list. It could mean going out by yourself, going with a group. It could even mean planting and landscaping your yard so that you have native plants with seeds, berries, insects that birds need so that your yard will be a place where birds can thrive. You can bird when you're walking, when you're in your living room, when you're driving, when you're kayaking, when you're biking. I mean, really, you can bird in a lot of different ways. So I just wanted to leave people with a big sense of what birding can be about. So here's my list of why I think birding is a healthy hobby. First thing, I think it's really good for your brain. I think as you'll see as I go through my list, it's a fair amount of work. I mean, even expert birders are always learning something about birds. There are a lot of species of birds, and so you have to start to really engage your brain as you begin to absorb information about a bird, what to look for, how to identify it. We use our eyes, so I think it's good for our eyes. I think it's good for our peripheral vision. Steve and I both have floaters, so sometimes we look up and we go, oh, what's that bird? Oh, darn, it's my floater. But you're always kind of looking around, noticing for a shape, noticing for movement. So I think it's good for your eyes. I think it's good hand-eye motor skills. So one of the things you have to learn when you're birding is you see something, then you pick up your binoculars, you put them up to your eyes, and you have to learn how to find them in that space, in that place that you just saw them. The other thing we do is we use our ears. when we're birding, especially here where the trees are tall and they're, we have all these coniferous trees, so we've got green, it's hard to find birds. So hearing them is a great way to know that there are birds out there, and learning bird calls is a whole kind of science and art in and of itself. So it's good for our ears. I think that birding also helps us use our observational skills, and we become much more aware of our environment around us, which I know is good for balance because we're looking, we're hearing, we're thinking about habitat, what might be there. Birding puts you outside. To me, that's a huge benefit. I mean, you could be birding from your house or your apartment, but outside is a great place to bird, and you can be walking. You could be in a wheelchair. You could be hiking in the mountains. You could be kayaking. You could be biking, snowshoeing. It keeps you moving, keeps you upright. And in Whatcom County, we are fortunate to have particular raptors that come into the area in the winter, and seabirds that come here in the winter to rest before they head back north to nest. And so we actually have a really rich birding area here in the winter, which is unusual. And so in the winter, birding is a great excuse to get outside. I think that birding is good for your soul. It boosts your mood. It brings you joy. Birds are beautiful. They're survivors. They do these amazing things. They migrate thousands of miles without stopping sometimes. There's so much we can learn about them, and they're very life-affirming. Birding is also good for your balance. So imagine you're walking down a little trail in the woods, and all of a sudden you hear a bird, you look up, and there's a log in front of you, and so you have to think, oh, okay, I got to get my feet stable. You grab your binoculars, you put them up there, you're looking up, you're standing. So, you're having good balance and good stability is a good thing, and birding will help with that. A few other things. I think birding helps people be more connected to the cycles of nature and life cycles, the rhythms of nature, because birds are very seasonal. Some birds are here year round. Many birds migrate through. Some birds migrate here and nest and then leave again. I do something called phenology, where I track on my calendar when the first, hummingbird comes back or the first swallow comes back. And it's a way of saying, oh, great, it's March. And if you are a social person, birding, I can guarantee if you go out for a walk and you have a pair of binoculars around your neck, people will stop and say, are you seeing anything interesting today? Or maybe they're a birder and they'll say, what have you seen so far? So if you would like an activity that people like to engage with, it's probably like walking your dog. People want to stop and learn about your dog. So if you walk with binoculars, people want to know what you're doing.
Or they'll come up to you and say, oh, have you seen that eagle at the end of the block?
Okay.
That's often something that people do.
And one last thing. Birding is good for birds. And I love birds, and I care about birds, and I care about the environment. So I'm just going to put a plug in for this. When you bird and you see what birds need, I think it raises our awareness of what they need in the environment. Unfortunately, one of the things we're finding since 1970, a big study found that we have lost 1/3 of the bird population, meaning 3 billion breeding adult birds have been lost since 1970. This is primarily due to loss of habitat. Some of that's related to climate change. And then there's a couple other biggies, backyard cats and window strikes, pesticide use. There's many, many things that affect birds, and our populations are going down, but there are things we can all do. So I think loving birds and birding is good for birds. It's good for the environment, which is ultimately good for us and good for our soul. So I hope, oh my goodness, sorry. So I hope that all of you, if you're not a birder, that gave you some reason to think about getting engaged in birding.
So we're going to show you some favorite birds. There are so many different species, but we're going to show you some favorite birds of ours. Let me pull this up here. We're going to show you the favorite birds that you may see in your backyard or that are really common around here and are sort of fun birds. And we're going to start out with the black-capped and the chestnut-backed chickadee. And these two birds are extremely common. People see them all the time. The black-capped chickadee is more in the hardwoods, and the conifer and the chestnut-backed chickadee is more in the areas that have conifers. And you may see both of these out in the environment. I was going to tell you something interesting about these birds. One thing is that they are one of the smallest birds to survive in the far north. I mean, these are way up in the boreal forest, and they do that because they're able to cache seeds, and their brain actually gets larger as fall approaches, the hippocampus, so that they can remember where they put all the feed that they cached. And one of the other ways that they survive in the winter is by sleeping in small groups. They have a little, like in the brush or in a little hollow, they will all gather and sleep all in one little bunch. And I think Sue's going to play the chickadee sound here, which we just love this sound. And so just play it. Play it again. And anyway, that's one of our favorite sounds around our house here. We have a lot of chickadees, and we just love that sound. So we'll go on to the next one, and Sue's going to talk about this one, these two birds.
Okay, these are some of my favorites. Sorry about that. The Anna's hummingbird is now a year-round resident in Whatcom County, and this has not always been the case. In the last 40 years, the Anna's hummingbird has slowly been moving northward in terms of year-round. They used to only come as far as Northern California. And I think in Whatcom County, it's probably been the last 20 years or so when our numbers have started to slowly increase. We do a Christmas bird count every year. And our Anna's hummingbird numbers are just like going up. It's pretty interesting. And so, so we have weather like we're having right now, and you think, how do these birds survive? Well, they think that the reason the Anna's hummingbird is able to survive here year-round, there's two reasons. One could be climate change, the warming climate, but I think the thought is really that it's people's plants and in their yards, plantings, just the development, but primarily it's the bird feeders. It's the hummingbird feeders that people have available for them. And so particularly in the winter, if you have a hummingbird feeder and you're feeding an Anna's, it is really important to keep feeding them all winter long, especially when we have weather like this, because they need that food. They do eat insects, but they do need that food. And what they do when it gets really cold, maybe you know this, hummingbirds go into something called torpor, and they're able to lower their body temperature and lower their heart rate and make it through the night that way. They lose some of their body weight during the night, and they need food right away in the morning. The Rufous hummingbird, which if you've seen the male, they're very noticeable. They are migrants. So they fly here from Mexico. They get here in early March. Our male comes to our feeder about March 5th, and he knows right where the feeder is. He's been here before, most likely, or he was born here. And they stick around. The males actually leave the end of June, and they start migrating back, and they go along kind of the mountain ridges, and they feed off of wildflowers blooming in the mountains. The females and the young ones stay often through August or into August, and then they begin their migration. You know, the miracle of how does the baby hummingbird know where to go? Well, somehow they do. They are very territorial, and maybe you've heard them. One interesting thing about them is the I don't believe this. Is the dive. The male, when they're trying to mate with a female, they do this dive from above, go down to the ground and up, and their wing makes this really interesting zoom sound. Maybe you've heard that, but anyway, that's a little fun fact, as Tammy would say, about the rufous hummingbird. Oh, okay, I have the next two. Alrighty, the spotted towhee, my guess most of you have seen the spotted towhee around. They're very common. They are here year round. You find them in the edges. They like brush. Good thing for bird habitat is to keep brush in your yard. Keep it messy on the edges. And they're pretty elusive. They hop around. They can sound like a cat. They make a lot of funny noises. The male is really quite beautiful. This is the male. He's got the red eye. The female is unfortunately a little more drab. Their nests are in the ground. So, you know, we talk about cats wreaking havoc really on birds. That's one of the reasons you have birds that are ground nesters. And if you've got cats in your yard, they're going to find that nest most likely. One thing a spotted towhee does, this is the fun fact, is they do something called the double scratching foraging. So what the towhee does in this one little movement, they kind of hop up and use both their feet and scrape the ground, and then they come back down. It's a pretty cool movement. And so that's what they're doing. They're foraging around in the ground all the time. Now, the varied thrush, you may or may not have seen. They're a bit more elusive. They prefer coniferous forests. So like we have them, we live up in the hills above Lake Samish. You're most likely going to see them in deeper woods, or if we get a snowfall up in the hills, the varied thrush will come down to yards and feeders. They are part of the thrush family. They are a bird in steep decline. Their populations have declined very severely due to habitat loss and loss of forests. They also are ground feeders. They use their beak to stir up duff, and then they poke around. They don't really migrate, but what they do is in the summer, or when they breed and nest, they move a little higher up. So we have them in our yard like October through April, and then they disappear, but we hear them in the hills. And I want you to listen to their call. It's a very beautiful call. Maybe you've heard it, maybe not, but it's a very beautiful call. Whoops, it's just one note. And that call, thrushes all have a flute-like call. That's what they're known for. So it's really a very beautiful bird. Okay.
So I'm going to talk about 4 different woodpeckers here. Hairy and downy woodpecker, and the northern flicker, and the pileated woodpecker. So the hairy woodpecker and the downy woodpecker are interesting because they look very similar. And you see both of them around here. They're quite common. The hairy woodpecker you see more around the urban areas and more in the more in hardwoods. The downy woodpecker is a little more preferential towards the conifers, although you do see it in the hardwoods as well. The interesting thing about these 2 birds is it's hard to tell in this case, but the downy woodpecker is about half the size of the hairy woodpecker, maybe about 2/3 of the length and half the size. And even though they look the same, they actually they're not even related to each other. It's an example of coevolution where the downy woodpecker evolved to look like the hairy woodpecker, basically to allow itself to be more threatening to be more dominant with other species, and which is pretty interesting. So anyway, you see both of those around here. And two other common woodpeckers in this area are the northern flicker, which is extremely common. They are ubiquitous in North America and Canada, all the way down through Mexico. And you'll see them all over in your yard, in your yards or in the forest. They also are known for waking people up in the morning in the early summer by tapping or drumming on drain pipes. And they just love to do that. And a lot of people don't like that because it wakes them up in the morning. And of course, we've got the pileated woodpecker, which is this magnificent crow-size bird that is just glorious to see. And they're actually relatively tame. You can get fairly close to them. They fly around quite a bit, and you'll see them in the urban environment. You'll see them around Lake Padden. You see them. They were nesting by the dog park a couple of years ago by Lake Padden. And something interesting about hummingbirds is, not hummingbirds, what am I talking about? Woodpeckers, is they have super long tongues. They chisel in, especially the pileated, its tongue is actually twice as long as the beak, and it wraps around the top of their head, and it's pointed, and the tongue is pointed, has barbs on it, and it's actually sticky. And the purpose of that is to grab the insects, like the ants or other insects that are inside the tree. And there's a lot of interesting things about woodpeckers, but I'm going to cut it a little short because of time.
You want to listen?
Well, Sue's going to play the northern flicker and the pileated for you because they're both quite interesting to listen to. You missed it. And then I think she's going to play the pileated for you too as soon as she gets there.
So
that was the northern flicker. And then she's got the pileated that she's going to play the call for you here. They can be a little confusing as to when you hear them. They sound a little bit the same, but the pileated has a much a lower quality, much more bassy quality to its sound. Then I'm going to talk about two interesting birds that you can see down in the Skagit Valley. Actually, you can see them also up in rural Whatcom County. Trumpeter swans, which are here all winter. And the trumpeter swans are the largest, I think the largest bird in the United States. They weigh about 36 pounds. They're large enough that if one is injured, and if you go up, people have actually had their arms broken if they tried to pick up one that's been injured, and the wings are so strong that they actually had hit a person and broken their arm. In 1935, they were hunted early in the century, in the 1800s. They were hunted, and they were down to 36 individuals, and so they stopped all the hunting on the trumpeter swans, and now there's thousands and thousands of them, and they're not endangered anymore. They're quite glorious. They're huge. They make a wonderful trumpeting sound. And then the other interesting bird you can see if you go down to the Skagit right now, especially the Skagit, Fur Island and down to the Skagit area, is snow geese. Snow geese, flocks of thousands of them, and you're going to play the sound, I think. The black and white wingtips, when you see these flying against a blue sky, the black wingtips and the white body It's just an amazing sight. And they also have an amazing sound in this huge flock as they fly around. So Sue's going to play that. They'll play this.
Oh, yeah.
So when you get a flock of thousands of these flying, all making that sound, it's just an unbelievable sound. The last bird I'm just going to quickly mention is the great blue heron. Great blue herons, there's a lot of them around here. There's an active heron colony behind the water treatment plant, and they are about ready to start occupying that. In March, they will start to occupy that colony. And so it's a great place to go there, especially April, May, June, July, to check out the herons that are nesting there. And so those are the birds that we have got so many birds that we love, but that's a few here that we love. And then I'm going to show you some resources to help you learn more about our local birds. So as Sue mentioned, we're part of North Cascades Audubon Society. I'm president and Sue's treasurer at the current time. And the North Cascades Audubon website is a great place to go to find out more information about, I'm trying to figure, I lost, okay. I can't get to the top of my screen here. Hold on a second. Anyway, this is a great place to go to find the more information about the North Cascades Audubon and resources. We have, I'm sorry, I can't see the top of my screen, so I'm trying to show you something here. I got to figure this out here.
No, just.
Oh, here, okay, I see it now. There's some, anyway, there are area, if you go to the menu, the best place to go is to the events section. And the other place to go is to the birding section, and you will see getting started. And there's actually a whole video of the birds of this area, and lots of information about those birds. If you can hold on a second, I'm going to show you. Hold on a second here.
There's our website.
Okay, and I'm going to share this with you one more time. Okay, I know what. Okay, here, hold on a second. Okay, well, I can't get to the menu right now because something is in the way here. So I don't know why I can't get to the menu. But anyway, it's a great site to go to, and there's lots of information. Just type in North Cascades Audubon.
It's in the chat.
And you'll see lots of information about our chapter. And so we wonder, at this point, we're going to open it up to questions, see if we can have any questions.
You want to go back to the...
Well, I'll be darned if the question in the chat box is mine.
You'll be what?
I'll be darned. The only one in the chat box is my question, but I wonder why. Anyway. It is, why did the flickers like to get the pipe?
I think they like to hammer on the drain pipes because it makes, because of the sound, it makes it so much more, it's a courtship, and they're doing that for the quality of the sound, and it, compared to a tree, it's such a loud sound. Because of the hollow pipe, and
the louder the better, right?
The louder the better, right? The louder the better. Red-breasted sapsuckers also do this, but they use they typically will use the back of metal signs along the roads, and which also amplify the sound a great distance.
Okay, can I ask one more question? You said that some of the bird loss is from hitting windows. And
Yeah.
is there a way to decrease that?
Yeah, there are. I mean, the window strikes are both, it's a big problem in urban areas where you have tall high rises, and during migrations, birds get confused by the lights. And oh, it's terrible. The number of birds that die in migration that are hitting these, big high rises, big, what do you call those big tall buildings? But in your home, yeah, there are products you can buy, and there are these little decals you can put in your window. But what I hear is really the best are these like vertical striping. I don't. If you just went online and looked up, products for window strikes, or you went to, the Audubon website, National Audubon, or the American Bird Conservancy, there are a lot of products out there.
The other thing about feeding birds, if you're feeding birds in your backyard, the best strategy is really you should feed them. If you can get them as far away from the house, the feeders as far away from the house as you can, it's better. Say, 40, 50, at least 30 feet away. Or the other thing is if you have them immediately really, really close, I mean, just like 2 feet from the house, and then that will also cut down on the number of birds that strike the windows. But having them far away from the house is the best strategy. There's a couple other questions here. One's about somebody stopped feeding birds because of the invasive species. I'm not sure what they mean.
Oh, you mean like starlings or sparrows?
Right. I'm not sure about that. There are hawks, and there are hawks. There's Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks that just love songbirds, but that's how they survive. And they're going to, whether you're feeding them or someone else is feeding birds, the Cooper's hawks and the sharp-shinned hawks are going to find songbirds to eat. So that's just sort of a natural part of the environment. So I wouldn't stop feeding just because of having a hawk around. The invasive species, actually the number of house sparrows, English sparrows, has actually drastically declined in the United States. It's not really that big of a deal. And starling populations really aren't increasing either. So I don't think, unless you don't like the starlings, it's really not that big of a deal.
Unless they're eating all your food.
Unless they're eating all your food,
Or
right.
it could be rats. I know.
I was going to say something about, if you have a lot of finches at your feeder, or if you have pine siskins at your feeder, this is probably not a good time. That you probably should not be feeding birds right at this moment until maybe the end of February, because of the salmonella bacteria that's going around in birds, and it gets transmitted via feeding from bird to bird,
when they're in close proximity.
When they're in close proximity. And so if you have a lot of finches or the siskins, then it'd be a good idea not to be feeding birds now until probably the end of February. Give them a chance to
disperse, really,
right.
Yeah.
The salmonella the outbreak is a natural occurrence. It happens all the time. It comes and goes. There's something also called the finch beak, house finch beak, or
the eye disease.
The eye disease that also is spread between birds. But it's sort of like the common cold or the flu among humans. Birds have diseases, and they come and go in the population every year, and some birds develop resistance and don't come back, and some birds don't survive. Any other questions?
you have, I see the website for Audubon's up there. You could contact me if you had questions. You can reach me at sparrott@northcascadesaudubon.org. Or you can do info@northcascadesaudubon.org too, either way.
Or on our website, if you go to North Cascades Audubon website, there is a contact, a link at the bottom. And if you click on info at North Cascades Audubon, we'll answer any questions for you. I was just gonna, one last thing, because Sue talked about the joy of birding. And hold on a second, I was gonna make this a larger view, so for Sue. One thing that, I've been birding, my 4th grade teacher got me involved in birding. We joined the junior Audubon when I was in 4th grade. She had all of us join the junior Audubon, and that sort of hooked me right there. I've always listened to birds and watched birds since then. And, so many people are visually into birds, but people talk to me and they say, or I've thought about this, and I thought, if I had to lose my sight or my hearing, which would I rather lose? And I think I actually would rather lose my sight, because I love listening to the birds so much. In fact, so much of the birding I do now is by sound. It's by sound and not by observation, because I just love that, of the sounds of birds. And that, I encourage anyone to sort of get into the sounds of birds too, because that just opens up such a much richer experience with birds.
Okay, Tammy, was that healthy? Was that healthy enough? Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, round of applause for her.
Yeah.
I see that, Tom.
Thank you. That was great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.